My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And if you've listened to me long enough, you'll probably know how much I dislike when people use a little bit of evidence and they use it to support an agenda, and they're not actually looking at all the facts. And I dislike it even more when they use social media and they become super popular and they become very good at influencing a lot of people to do the wrong things. So I found a really great example of it, and I want to show you that right now.
You guys know the number one outcome or the number one indicator for how children grow up to thrive, whether or not they actually do?
I thought it was the daddy in the house.
Absolutely not.
What's
Believe
that?
it or not, it is the quality of their mother's happiness.
Wow.
The quality of their mother's happiness is the number one indicator as to whether or not a child will grow up to thrive. Because if you have a depressed mother, if you have an anxious mother, if you have a mother with post-traumatic stress disorder who is having to disconnect from her own body, she cannot show up to nurture you. She cannot show up to support you. She cannot fully step into that space. And what she will teach you about being in relationships with other people, whether you can trust them, whether you can trust yourself, whether you can actually be committed and connected to somebody and know that they will reciprocate that to you in a healthy way. She teaches you that, not through her words, but through her actions. You guys know the number one
Okay, there's so much wrong with that, it's hard to know where to start. Let's take it from the top. It's the quality of the mother's happiness that's most correlated to a child thriving in the world. Absolutely not true. Going by percentages, what you would want is two parents that can model a good, loving, caring, reciprocal relationship. That's what you would want. It's not just about the mother's happiness, and I'll get into that a little bit more. She's talking about, too, like a depressed mother, an anxious mother, a mother with PTSD. And she's correlating that to somebody being unhappy. These are two massively different things. You can be very unhappy, but not have PTSD. You can be unhappy with things of the way they're going, but not be anxious and depressed. So she's not even comparing apples to apples here. So what does this really look like? It looks like modern day individualism, and it looks like narcissism masquerading as woman's empowerment. But as you'll see as I go through the show, there's nothing empowering about having this type of, and let's call it what it is, it's an opinion, or you're taking one little fragment of some evidence and then extrapolating it into this thought that, well, number one, that women, or let's say mothers, are more important than fathers, which that's not true. And the other part is that it's insinuated and actually pushed, if you listen to this lady long enough. And by the way, this lady's not a therapist, but she has more influence than me and all the therapists I know put together. The insinuation here is that all the resources need to go towards the mother to make her happy, which is a way of saying happy wife, happy life. But let's talk about this a little bit more. When we're dealing with trying to raise a happy child or a child who thrives, we don't want them to be codependent. We don't want them to be parentified. We don't want them to have to manage their parents' emotions and feelings. And if you're doing these types of things, this would be considered to be child abuse. So in this situation, when we're saying here is that it's the mother's happiness that's the most important thing, that all resources need to go to that, including her spouse, and the children need to go to making her mother happy. Well, what we're doing here is we're actually endorsing everything I just said. Parentification, we're endorsing codependency. We are basically neglecting a child because they're not allowed to have their own feelings and emotions and needs because they have to take care of the mother. This is highly destructive. If this person was an actual therapist, it would be unethical to say these types of things. And yet, this stuff explodes with all of these likes and everything else, which is extremely destructive. So, what else is going on here? Well, it's obvious, right? Mentally unhealthy people can't be the best parents they can be. And that's just very simple. And that goes for the father or the mother. If there's somebody in a situation like that, they should go seek help. They shouldn't be seeking their spouse and their children to make them better. There's other ways of doing that. Also, men, believe it or not, men can be unhappy in a marriage. That's true. But it doesn't show up on a study like this. Why? Because not all men, but more men compared to women. When men feel unhappy, they still lead up or lead with their values, their virtues, and their responsibilities. So it's not often that you're going to see a man who's unhappy and wants their 6-year-old daughter to make them happy. Or a man who's unhappy at work, but he's still paying the bills, that thinks his 9-year-old son needs to be the source of his happiness or else he's going to fall apart. And if that doesn't happen, then somehow he's going to take it out on his children. Because that's literally what we're saying here. If the mother's not happy, then nobody's happy. But if you're an adult, especially if you're a parent, you have bad days, you're unhappy, maybe you're somewhat unfulfilled in some area. That doesn't mean that you let your responsibilities as a spouse and a parent go away. So in this study, when we're trying to look at this, let's say, for example, as women's empowerment, to say women are much more important than men, because if they're unhappy, then the child doesn't do well. No, that's not empowering. Because what you're literally saying here is that women tend to be emotionally dysregulated. And if they are, they can't fix themselves. And if they are, they can't sit in their difficult emotions for a while and still be a good parent and still be a good spouse. And men tend to do that. So when we're looking at this, we're really saying that there's much more positive on the man's side here. But I don't even want to say that, because I still think it should be equal between both partners. And I don't care if it's 2 men, 2 women, whatever. We're talking about 2 partners. They're important. Not everybody, again, to reiterate it, they should not be at the beck and call of the mother to make her happy. That's not the way a good family is run, and it is not the way to make children thrive. Women in general, again, not always, but in general, do tend to be more neurotic. And when that happens, they do tend to be more unhappy with things. And when that happens, they're much more likely to end the marriage. There could be a divorce. Therefore, it's pretty logical to go along with the facts here and say that 80% of divorces are filed by women. Well, that makes sense. And if that's true, and it is, a divorce could be something that is difficult for a child to thrive through. Now, some marriages, yes, they do, they should end possibly, because a really bad marriage, let's say with a lot of alcohol and drug abuse, maybe physical abuse, verbal abuse, these types of things are not good for a child. But just for somebody to end a marriage because they're unhappy, let's say with themselves, this will put a child in a position where it's going to be difficult for them to thrive. So again, this misuse of the evidence is very destructive to people if they actually believe it. Now, what happens, for example, if the father is not exactly physically or emotionally present with the children? You're going to see the same types of things. You're going to see that children will have difficulty thriving. But again, it would be incumbent upon the man to fix himself, or at least, obviously, there should be support from his wife. Now, if you really want to compare the differences here, what we can do is we can compare the stats of how do children thrive if they're raised in a single mother home compared to a single father home. This would be really good stuff to look at, because if you're going to come up with this type of stuff and you're going to be putting it out all on social media about how it's the mother's happiness is the most important thing to raise a child, let's take a look at something here. Let's compare the household and how well children thrive in a single father household compared to a single mother household. From a single mother household, children are 4 times more likely to live in poverty. From a single mother home, children are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of high school. They're 10 times more likely to abuse drugs. They're 14 times more likely to commit a rape, 20 times more likely to go to prison, 32 times more likely to run away from home, and 70% of teen pregnancies are in single mother homes. And this one is the most disturbing. From a single mother home, you are more likely, a child is more likely to be murdered by that parent. I know people don't want to hear this, and that's kind of a tough one to hear. But I'm not trying to compare to say that men are better than women, fathers are more important than mothers. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying we need to really look at the evidence here and get away from this pushing an agenda that it's the mother's happiness above all. Because again, if it's the kids trying to make her happy, if it's everybody doing that, she might as well be an alcoholic or a drug addict or something else where all of the attention is going her way. And this creates dysfunction in every part of that household. And if you do look at how fathers do as single fathers, you'll see that they're extremely important. What would I suggest? Not that it matters, but I still go back to having 2 people in a relationship that are happy with each other, that can model a very good, loving and caring and respectful relationship between each other is the best thing that you can do to help a child thrive. Hopefully this has been educational for you. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.